Thank you all so much for joining us this morning. My name is Jolie Tepano. I'm the Executive Director of the Japan America Society of Alabama. Happy Cherry Blossom Festival Day. We're so excited to have some special guests on, and we're here right now with Mr. Richard Stockham with Paperworkers Local, who will be giving us a demonstration of Moku Hanga, a Japanese woodblock printing technique. And as you can see, he has a beautiful sakura cherry blossom print there in the corner that he'll be making. And I'll go ahead and mute my video and my audio and just let you take it away. Richard, thanks so much for joining us today and for giving this demonstration.
Absolutely, thank you very much. I'm Richard Stockham, and I'm a woodblock printmaker with Paperworkers Local, which is a group here in Birmingham that does all manner of prints, and we're a group of about 20 people, and we have shows about 5 times a year. And we have classes that we teach, and one of my specialties is doing this Japanese woodblock technique, which actually is quite old. It dates back to the Edo period, which is about 1600 to about 1850. And one of the most amazing things about these particular woodblocks is they were the first to develop a color print method. And the way that that works, and what I'm going to be showing you today, is you take a piece of paper, and I've got this right here, plastic bag, because it is damp. I damped it last night. And you take paper and you once it is moist, you will take the ink and you'll put it on the block, and then you'll rub the back of the paper with this tool, which is basically the press. And what it does is it impresses the ink that's on the block into the paper. And then you'll proceed through, I'll proceed through, I have a stack of 15 pieces of paper. With each one, it'll carry the same impression. Then what I'll do is I'll ink, and I will impress a different part of the block on this side. This is the background that has the red. And what this particular block will show, if you can see, is it's got basically just a flat surface, but it's got carve outs, and those carve outs correspond to the white blossoms that are on the block. And I will carve what is a gradation. I'll print a gradation of ink across here, beginning with a light pink up to a very strong cherry red at the top. I will use a wiping technique that will create the impression of a million little sort of dots across it to create the effect of looking at a group of cherry trees with a bunch of little blossoms, none of which are particularly distinct, but look like you're looking through a forest of cherry trees. Then on the other side, which is where the stem of the cherry blossom is, I'll use a black and a brown ink in succession to create a stem impression that'll have some 3D texture to it. And then at the bottom, though not on this print, I'm going to print on this block, I'll print a very thin line of green to accent the color of the spring colors of the green. So with that, I think, the last thing I want to tell you is that in order to be able to hold these pigments into the wood block, we use rice paste. And this rice paste, which is it's just rice flour that is boiled, not quite to boiling, in water, and it makes this glue that glues the pigments down into the paper, so that you'll see when I'm printing that the color will actually come through, and it is the matrix in the paper holds the ink, and so you have this. Once it's printed and it's dried, you can pour water on it. I don't really recommend that you do it, but it won't move. It will be situated. It won't blur. It won't do what watercolor pigments otherwise usually do. With that, let me get started by dampening the block, and I'll begin by running the first line of color, which will be the red block, and I'm going to begin with a very, very pale pink, and I'm going to go through all of them. That'll probably take me about maybe 15 minutes to run through all of them, and then the next color I'm going to do is going to go with the stem, and it'll begin with a light gray. We'll come back with the red, and we'll do a gradation, move it up the block, and you'll see the image develop as we go along. Without further ado, let me begin by dampening the block. And this is a horsehair brush, and it's used to mix the pigment and the paste onto the block. And here's the ink. So hold it up so you can see. There's just a ceramic bowl, and I use a long brush just to transfer the ink, which is nothing but pigment and watercolor, onto the block. And once there, I will smear the color all around. And our first impression. And as you can see, create a very pale pink on that make a ultimately make the the next series. In the meantime, what I have to do is keep the paper damp, because if it dries out, then I have to re-wet it. We don't have time for me to go through all of that. But so for the next few minutes, what I'm going to be doing is what you just saw, repeating it for all of these. At this stage, my blocks are still dry, and so I need to get the water level in the block so that there's no blotching or a pattern of ink because of the varying dampness and dryness in the wood. This is a piece of parchment paper, and it's just kitchen parchment. It's used so that the water on the back of the paper doesn't cause the to stick.
Richard, we have a question from Sarah. She says, can you only dampen the woodblock gradually? What would happen if you were to soak that part ahead of time?
Well, it's a good question. And if I soak the wood, the problem comes in two stages. One is that, and it's a very good question because it talks about how we do the course of running a series of prints. Wood will expand, and when you have a whole series of prints, you want it to expand at the same rate for each print. That's why you run through a whole series on one impression at a time. So the last impression may be a 32nd of an inch wider at this stage, at this size, though it's bigger at a larger print, but every print will be that same 32nd of an inch wider at the end. So the registration, that means that all of the different impressions line up at the same time. If you were to soak the block at one time, it would still have the problem of water evaporating over the course of it, and it would the block would shrink, or it might expand because the water's been sitting on it longer. And so we try to limit the rate of expansion and the amount of water that it takes up at a particular time to keep that expansion and contraction right in line with all the other blocks that are going to be used. So you can see there's a little gathering of ink, and I need to be a little more careful about that, but it will not matter by the time I've gotten to the third impression. One of the things I threw in here, there are two kinds of paper that I'm using. These are Japanese postcards, and you can see on the back that they've got a place, but they're made of the same kind of woodblock printmaking material. And in fact, a lot of the old Japanese prints would use this format, and people would buy them, mail them as New Year's Day cards, or that sort of thing. So I thought that would be fun to include in this stack. I noticed on the one that I just pulled that there's a certain amount of paste that's built up on the brush, so I'm not going to apply paste on this. I'm using the residual amount of paste from the previous impressions. This is one of the things that printers have to do, is just keep a sense of where the color and water and paste levels are, so that there's continuity across an edition of prints. You could probably tell that there was a change, and that was the water in that particular piece of paper had gotten heavier, and the barium was sticking. So I had to change out the backing paper, which in Japanese is called an atigama paper. Atigama, which is just something to provide some lubricant, dry lubricant on the back of the barium while you're making the print. Now, this rice paste that I'm using, I'm using rice paste, but it doesn't have to be rice paste. It can be any kind of flour paste. It serves the same purpose. Of course, rice paste was the easiest thing in Japan, but wheat paste has been used successfully as well. And it's just the same stuff that you made in school, where you just boiled flour and water, and it's amazingly effective. One of the things, it is used along with hide glue or nikawa in order to create woodblock prints. Find orientation on this particular piece of paper. I have put fingernail polish on the corners on where the paper goes into the block to make sure that the registration stays good across the entire series of impressions. And that is essential, because apart from the wood expanding, if you don't get the registration right, then you'll get misalignments and it destroys the effect. Let me hold it a little slower so people can see.
Yes, if you could hold it a little bit higher up as well, Richard, like right in front of the, yes, right there is perfect. Thank you.
Great. Yeah, any direction you can give me, I would appreciate it. I have, I can't really see from where I'm sitting what it looks like. So any suggestions, I would appreciate it.
Absolutely, I'll let you know. It looks great so far. Very interesting. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Well, this is the originally, you know, the way the woodblock prints were made in Japan for the longest time was that there was a process where there was a publisher, a designer, a carver, and a printer involved in each print. But as things came into the 20th century and Western methods made to Japan, a lot of these folks had a hard time, even though it was had been a really thriving industry, had a hard time perpetuating it, because at the time that it was done, it was not considered a fine art. In fact, it was more considered like comic strips, and they were available at when people would go to the theater, to the kabuki theater. They could buy, for the same price as a ticket, they could buy a bowl of noodles for the day and a print, which is sort of like when we used to go to the circus, we'd get a program, sort of a souvenir. These prints then in the 20th century began a process by a group of artists called the Hanga movement. And they did everything. They carved the block, did the designs, they printed them, and then they set about publishing them. And some of the woodblock artists were extremely successful. But even they had a hard time moving to what we think of as the fine art market. And they were able to make a living because of selling to the Western markets, France, Europe, and the States. And then there was this really amazing thing that happened during or as a result of the Pacific War. American comics came to Japan, and the traditional woodblock designs became reinvigorated, and of course manga have been just wildly successful, but they began with their roots in the woodblock tradition. Some of the old woodblock designs very much reflected these depictions: heroes, warriors, gods. And then one of the most interesting parts of it was that the manga craze came back here, and we have people that are, it is a billion-dollar industry. So something that was dead, pretty much dead by the 1920s, that got reinvigorated and is here as a multi-billion-dollar industry. One of the things which I've always liked about it, part of it is just the simplicity of it. But second of all, is its the tradition was tied to the pleasure quarters in Tokyo, Edo.
Could you hold that up a little higher for us?
Sure.
Thank you. Looks great.
And they became called ukiyo-e, pictures of the floating world, and it seemed particularly appropriate because we make these things of paper and water and earth, and it has this very transitory feel to it, and particularly when you do things, make images like flowers and prints and animal designs or designs of nature or landscape. The whole transitory Buddhist and Shinto nature of the images come across, and there's something deeply satisfying that it's not just the subject matter, but the material and the process that unifies it all. Of course, I was really looking forward to last year, the year of the pandemic. There was this worldwide woodblock conference that was scheduled for Nara, and I was really looking forward to going, but they, of course, canceled it because of the pandemic. And they were going to redo it this year, but just like the Olympics, it was canceled. So maybe next year. When I say that these are simple, the designs are simple, and it depends upon this cumulatively iterative process. One print, one impression after another. Some prints are so complicated, they have 20, 30, some even have 100 layers, and you can get incredibly complex and beautiful designs. But there are also things like gold leaf and crushed pearl and or shell and mica powder. The complexity of these designs, just there's really no end to it. In fact, they're still being explored. There was an entirely new technique invented in Tokyo in the 70s at Tokyo University called Moku, and it is basically takes wood, the lithography technique developed in the West, begun in the late 18th century, and does it on wood. And it's an incredibly vibrant process that combines using the fact that oil and water don't mix with these traditional methods. One of the odd things is that the thing that really enables all of this is this wonderful paper that was made, used to be made in the mountains of Japan. in villages where whole families did it for generations, but of course, it's not sustained a living wage, and so these papers have gotten more and more expensive, and a few companies have taken over the production of these papers with machines, but the machines just don't make the same kind of quality as these handmade papers. And the reason that's important is because you'll see I'm doing this bearing down and putting this pressure on the back of this paper to create this impression. And Western papers can't take that kind of continual beating without tearing. But these papers are made of kozu or mulberry, and they have long fibers, and they can take quite a lot of beating. And our paper is still one of those things that we're trying to find a replacement for. Some people have tried Tyvek, but it just doesn't have the water absorbency that we look for. I don't know if you can see, but I've got my block supported by 4 little pieces of paper. And what that does is it basically acts as a suspension system, keeping a certain flexibility in the block so that it makes it easier for me to pull the print. I've got 5 more, and we will flip it over and do the other side so that the block expands. In the same way, otherwise you run the risk, because I've carved on both sides of this block, you run the risk of getting a bowing of the wood, and that also, if it bows, will affect the registration. I'm gonna hold this up, let you see. There's you can see that.
Could you lift it a little bit? Just a little more. There you go. That's great.
I put the ink on, and you can tell here at the bottom that it's dry, so it's not going to print this. But here, the thing that makes it glisten is the rice paste and water mix. So when I put when I put the bearing down on it, it just forces it into the paper. So you can see how at the bottom I've intentionally left it unprinted so that it doesn't create a muddy color when I put the green on the bottom at the very end. And this is just a little water I'm adding to it to keep the block moist, because even in this short time, the block has begun to dry out. You know, it's interesting. I think it's almost paradoxical. We talk about the floating world and how these pieces are so transitory, but actually, I Japanese prints as well, and they're amazingly stable. I have prints from the early 19th century, and they really hold up surprisingly well. One of the things which is interesting to me, and I haven't found an answer that I've found to be particularly good, is all of these pieces of paper the Japanese home in the early 19th century didn't really have places for pictures to go up on the wall. And so, what did they do with them all? Did they just look at them and throw them into a bin? You know, were there albums? In doing some research, I haven't been able to find a consistent answer. If anyone knows, I would certainly appreciate it, putting it in the chat. Of course, the other thing about it was that Japanese prints were often combined images with texts, and that was because Edo had a 90% literacy rate in the early 19th century. And that's kind of just mind-boggling when you think about it. I can remember as a young child knowing people here who couldn't read. But when you have a literate society, then that makes these kinds of images just like I guess today we have Instagram and YouTube and those kinds of mass communications.
Could you bring it a little bit to the right?
To the right.
That's great. Thank you.
Let's see. Two more. And I think the first thing that amazed me when I first started studying how to make these was how little amount of ink is involved in any one impression. And that's part of what I think is so appealing about these kinds of prints is the delicacy of the images, but they don't have the kind of washiness that associated with a Western watercolors. And so it has another quality that I've always found very attractive, and that is that it has a both a sense of stability, but at the same time a sense of evanescence, of being only there for the moment. How's that?
That's good. Maybe a little higher, right in the center. Wonderful.
Great. All right. Last one. Let's see. There's a little blob of something in the paper, but it will be covered up when the wood color gets on it. One of the things about kozo paper is because it's the inner bark of the mulberry tree, is that you do sometimes get little bits of flecks in the paper from the bark, from the outer bark, and it's just part of the paper. And so usually what we try to do when we get that is arrange the way the paper lines up with the design so that it is either minimalized or used to some kind of advantage. You will see in many Japanese prints that the wood grain from the design often is used to advantage, for example, to create a wave pattern or to create a feather design that increases the kind of interest. Other times, there's an attempt to by using the grain of the wood at cross hatches and doing two impressions to cancel so you can't see the grain. Now here, I'm going to step away for a moment and clean the brush because I'm going to move to the black pigment on this side. Take me 1 second over here. Sorry.
I'll go ahead and chime in while you're washing the brush, but hope you're all enjoying the presentation. If you have any questions at any point, feel free to use the chat feature or our Q&A and type in a question, and I'll make sure that Richard hears it. And
all right. Yeah. Now I'm going to, can you see the, I'm going to move this so that you can actually see the block. And this is just the black pigment.
You could bring it up a little higher, Richard. I think we can, there we go.
You see it? It's made, it's what it's called sumi, which is actually made from charred fish bones. And you can smell it. It's not a particularly pleasant smell, but this is the ink that all Japanese writing is what used to be done with, and it is the smell of every Japanese print shop. It is the predominant ink, and I buy it in these containers, and when you open these up, it's been cooked down till it's, I don't know if you can see it, it's like a jelly. And so you take a little bit of it, very little bit of it, and mix it with water, and you get this nice black ink. And I'm going to hydrate this block. So I'm going to spread a good bit of water on it. I don't want any warping because it means it'll make it more difficult for the alignment between this image and the previous one. We'll let the water sit on it for a minute, and I'm going to, meantime, take these papers and put them back. And I've got in this, I'm going to organize them a little bit so that they four. Okay. all good. Yeah. Now, make sure all the color is out of the brush. Won't matter that much because we're going from the lighter color to the dark color, but I still don't like it to be that much of a factor. And I'm going to begin with a very, very light coat, because what I want to do with this is, and I'll show you here in a second, this is just a flat carving of the outline of the branch. But by the way I'm going to print it in layers, I'm going to create, because it's cherry, I'm going to print the first one flat. The second one I'm going to wipe stripes across it, because I wanted to create that image that cherry branches have of the bark having stripes or strips along it. And then I'm going to, the third impression, I'm going to come along one edge of it to create the shadow line so that it has a dimensionality to it. So 3 impressions, same color, but with different techniques to create a 3-dimensional effect on it. Now, you say, why are you beating so hard on it? Well, it just makes it easier. The carved away part is not part of the impression. I do not want the paper to get down into that area, so I've carved it away fairly deeply. But the impression is only going to be where the wood is flat. Wait a minute. I am going to use one which I printed on the wrong side initially to just test it, make sure I got enough paste in it, because I don't want it to be a modeled effect. The modeled effect, when you don't have enough paste, it's called the Gorizumi effect.
Could you repeat that, Richard? I think we couldn't We couldn't quite hear you with the signal.
It's called Gorazumi, and it means sesame. And yeah, it's great. This was just I'm wanted to test. I'm gonna need a little. I needed.
Okay, Richard, I think we might have lost you for a second there. And I think your video is off now. If you would go ahead and reboot your video and maybe show us that last one again. Yes, okay, we've got you back.
Am I there, Ben? Do you have me now?
Yes, I can see you now. So we see your face.
Okay. Let's see. I've got it. Can you see the setup now?
Yes, so it's a little slow. So it's lagging behind a bit, but there we go.
Oh.
Okay. Yes, so we can see it now.
Okay,
And I think you're.
Let's see.
There we go. It just says your network bandwidth is low, so we might just have to wait a second for it to get back to normal. Okay, it looks like it's doing all right now. If you want to go ahead and leave the camera there and show us what you were trying to show us before, I think we can see it now. Thank you.
Great. I appreciate that. I'm doing old technology and new technology, and they don't go well together. So this is put it up just the industry shout at this. It's very light. It will get much darker with the next impressions. Is that any better? Is the better?
Yes, I don't think we can quite see you. It's just lagging a little bit, but if you take some time and show it, then it might catch up quickly. But yeah, your video is a little bit frozen.
I'm sorry. You may turn it off and turn it on?
That's all right. No, I think it'll be all right. It kind of comes in and out. So if we have a good angle of you right now, but if you want to showcase something, just make sure to take some extra time to do it so the video can catch up.
Well, the one good thing is that this is a repetitive process. If you miss it, wait a minute, and you'll see it.
Yes, that does work out well for this kind of situation, for sure.
Okay. Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay. These beginning pieces are intentionally light because I have to create a sort of a background base for the image to develop its sort of three-dimensionality. I plan to have 3 red impressions and 3 black impressions, and as they progress, they'll get more and more defined as the colors get darker. So I was just checking on the time, and it's going slower than I thought it would. Planning these things out is never perfect. But so when I finish these prints, if anyone would care to buy, they're going to go through the Paperworkers logo, and I think that they're going for $15 a piece.
That's great. And we'll have some information available on our website on our Cherry Blossom Festival page with Paperworkers Local's website information as well. So
Great.
You should be able to access them there if you'd like to buy a print.
Right, and the proceeds are going to be split evenly between our 2 organizations. So you can buy a print and do something nice for the organization at the same time. Let's see. That visible?
Yes, looks good.
Yep. And now that you can probably tell as the ink has warmed up on the block a little bit, it's getting more of a dimensional effect even now, because the darker part of the ink is forming on the edges, which is what I really want to have happen later on, but it's fine now. Hello.
Richard, are you all right? I think.
Yeah, I was shaking the table and it, let's see. Can you see me?
No, we can't see you right now. We just see your name.
Okay, well, give me a minute. Because what happened was it fell off the table while I was shaking it.
Uh-oh.
It's all right. Let's see if I can. All right. There we go.
Okay, now we can see you.
Great.
Okay. If you want to maybe tilt it a little bit to show the right of the table where you'll be doing most of the work.
There.
Yes, I think that'll be good.
Is that good?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. My dog. Okay. There we go. So one of the nice things about this is that after you've been printing for a while, you get into sort of a rhythm, and it has a nice calming quality about it. And the last three. And I might show you. You can see it on both sides at this stage. The paper is damp, and you can see that the image actually appears on both sides. But as it progresses and the paper dries, it'll become less obvious on the back side. Okay. This is the last of these impressions. I'm going to turn the paper over. Tell you what I'm going to do. The first impressions that I did are kind of thin, and so I'm going to take those four and do them, run through those quickly, and see if I can bring the the color level up to what I want it to be. I think that I can do that quickly. Yep. That's right. That's better. Okay. Yep. That's good. Now we're going to wash my brush off for a second. I'm going to come back and put the next red color, make it more. You begin to see the gradation develop, and you'll see much more of the background flowering. Back in 1 second. All right. So, you still with me?
Yes, we're still.
Good. Good. I just hadn't heard, and I didn't know, but it doesn't matter.
We've
still
got,
be doing this for a while.
yeah, so we've got 10 people watching live with us right now too.
Oh, that's great. Now, create a bit of a texture. I'm going to blot out a little bit of the ink once I put it on there. Create something of a random dotting pattern. Oh, you failed me.
Yes, I think we lost your video again there.
Yep, it's, I shook the table again.
Sound okay?
Yeah, everything's back.
There we go. We see you now.
Okay, I'm on a less than stable platform.
That's all right. We've got you back, it looks like.
Yep. And so I'm going to print this one more time to get a little more color, because I know we're running a little short on time, and I would like to create more of a It's getting a little there. Probably tell it's becoming a little more obvious, the background filling in. Okay.
looking great.
Thank you. With each successive iteration, it's going to become more in focus, more realized. But it starts off in a more, as you've noticed, a very sort of a nebulous state, and each pass becomes smaller and more darker, and so it's like watching something slowly come into focus. That's one of the things I like about the process.
So would you say that the order is important of each print? So if you've got your first print, does that always need to be the first on the new block?
Yeah.
And in the same order, so all the depth is the same?
That's exactly right. And one of the things which is, because it's water and I'd gotten a little blob of red on the margin, but I was able to remove most of it. When it dries, a little white coloration will take all the rest of that because it's not been forced down into the paper. So yeah, you're exactly right. The order is really important for that reason, because you will probably notice if you look. I'll show you the next one. What had looked like very defined lines on the branch get blurred under this impression, but you have to remember that we're going to come back and create another impression on top of it. But what I really like about it is I can create the sense of focus or going just out of focus with this technique. And so that's what that's about. Okay. So you'll notice at the top, it's blurry a little bit. It'll come back in focus with the subsequent impressions. But that's right where I've just put the additional ink. It's bringing the flowers themselves out.
So I just want to make a little announcement as we're coming up on 12 p.m. I wanted to let everyone know that even though this is the end of our time, we will keep on with the demonstration for a little longer. But if you need to leave now, I see a couple people have dropped off in the attendees list. If you need to leave now and you'd like to see the end of the demonstration, then a video will be available on the website after the end of today. So you'll always be able to come back and check and watch anything that you might have missed.
Okay. And this will be the last of this impression. I'm going to turn it over and do the other impression, and I think it'll be done for the day. I've got got 2 more impressions to do after that. but I don't think that there's any point in continuing that on through the demonstration. It's just going to be a question of going over the same blocks with smaller tools. I'll show you smaller brushes. Show you that in just a second.
That's great. And what we can do is take some pictures of the final product and maybe some of the tools that you use and add that to the website after we have our live event. The site will be up through April, so people can come back and see the final product and the pictures and maybe some close-ups of the tools you've got there, and we can write some information down that anything that comes to mind when you're making the prints, but we're not live anymore. We'd be happy to share it on the site.
That sounds great. That sounds great. Yep. Okay. So. Back over to this block, and I'm going to use a smaller brush to do more of a You can begin to see a little bit of the bark developing. One more impression, it'll pop out more.
I think the video was a little slow there. Would you mind holding it up again for us?
Absolutely.
Excellent, thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, this is the technique called fupatori, or wiping. You ink the block up and then you wipe away parts of it so that you get a variation in the part, give it a dimensionality. And traditionally, you use your fingers. We'll be off shortly.
Could you hold it a little higher so we could see the
Yeah.
full? Yes, right there. Thank you.
And I hope that you can tell, but it is developing a much more of a dimensional character to the stem when you remove parts of the ink. And it's not just a uniform color, but has the effect of giving it something of a 3D effect. This was something that was developed by printmakers in the early 20th century. Is that focused?
Yes, that's great. We could really see the detail there.
Now, it will change in its aspect because it has a bunch of water in it right now, and it will dry. And when it dries, it will get lighter, but also they'll become more, the colors are more defined in certain areas. The effect of water is to make it look more uniform and blotchy. So you have to wait till they dry to really get the sense of what they look like. That's why I'm proceeding slowly. I don't want to just put all of it. That's why it's in 3 stages instead of doing it just once. Is that too close? Can you see that?
Yes, it looks good. I think my video might pop in when I talk, so I'm usually waiting to until the paper's pulled away to speak.
Okay, I've got about
those are good shots.
I've got about four more of these to do, and I'm going to let the paper dry. So I think we're probably done at that point. And then I'm going to finish the last impression on this side and the last impression on the other side. So, oh, and then I've got to put the green impression. So that's 3 more impressions. I don't think that there's a rush on that because the paper's going to dry.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to put it together, and we'll certainly love to see some progress photos. Sorry we can't have you on for the whole time, but we know that it's a very long process and takes a lot of time and care. So I'll look forward to seeing the final product, and I know our attendees will too.
Thank you. Well, I will send along the photographs.
Thank you so much. And just let us know if you've got any final comments for our audience today and for our video.
I appreciate the opportunity to show you something that I enjoy. Last one.
Beautiful, and I've certainly learned a lot about the process. I know you've been out to our Cherry Blossom Festival for several years in the past and done some really great prints for everybody, but this was a really neat opportunity to see virtually all of the detail and have the techniques explained and the history of Moku Hanga and the process, and it was really a rewarding presentation for everybody. So we so appreciate you being a part of this and hope that we have some people to come online and purchase these prints for themselves. And I'll be sharing that information with everyone soon. But in the meantime, thank you so much, Richard, and we'll go ahead and sign off on our Zoom here and look forward to seeing the final product.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.